So this is an idea that I've had for a little while for potentially Ghost Ship to potentially implement, and I wanted to try and test out the new weapons a little bit and get comfortable with the new weapons before I actually made this particular video. But essentially, one of the things that I have is that, like, the main design of the game is designed to have one of each class, right? You have your gunner, you have your scout, you have your driller, you have your engineer. You're supposed to run one of each dwarf. But a lot of times, me and a few people I play with, we find it fun to run full dwarf teams. So you'll have, you know, full gunner team, full driller team, full scout team. Not only that, I have the people I play with more often only like one particular class. For example, Scout is by far the most played class. There are 3 Scout mains that I know, that I personally know, that just because of the grappling hook. And it gets a bit tiresome when the gunplay is really good. The guns are really good, the guns are really unique, there's a decent amount of modifiers. I would maybe like to see a few balance changes, but I'm going to put that in a separate video. You have your overclocks, obviously, as well. You know, every gun has 5 to 7 overclocks for it. And something I thought of potentially would be, first off, some of the weapons and abilities, in my opinion, need a little bit more upgrade system. We need a little bit more modifications. The pickaxe only has 2 rows of modifications. The gear pieces, most of the time, only have 3. It's really in the 3 to 4 range. Nothing has more than 4. You have 3 types of grenades, although that does match the 3 types of primaries. I'll touch that in the end. And your armor has 4 tiers as well. Here's the main thing I want to talk about when it comes to gear. 90% of the DRG community plays either the same 1 or 2 builds when it comes to their gear. For example, if you look at armor, Tier 1 mineral bags is by far the most picked. You know, Tier 2 healthy, by far the most picked. Tier 4 breathing room, by far the most picked. So, because this build right here, which is 3213, is the most picked build for every single gear. Same thing if you look at most builds are going to be the same. On your pickaxe, you're obviously picking 1. Shockwave is not picked. So you're either going to go with Serrated Edge, which is my personal choice, or the charge speed for the faster cooldown. This is a toss-up 50-50. There's no real choice here, but nobody picks Shockwave. What if we had a little bit more options? What if we had some other options? Now, for the pickaxe specifically, I look at what you have for your rig. Every class has a specific damage resistance that they get. So the gunner gets access to explosive damage reduction. The scout gets fall damage reduction. The driller gets fire damage reduction. And the engineer is poison, right? Yeah, poison. So what if we had a similar system on the pickaxe? We had 2 extra tiers here. Not necessarily an overclock. I think pickaxe overclocks might be a bit broken, although I will propose a couple of ideas. I would like to see overclocks for certain types. Now, whether this could be implemented as modifiers, where you have like this extra. If you look at most guns' 5th tier is designed to change the way the gun plays. The minigun's a great example of this. So, aggressive venting, cold as the grave, hot bullets, they all change how the gun plays around. So, yes, they all have to do with the overheat mechanic of the gun, but it drastically changes. So, in aggressive venting, you want your weapon to overheat because it burns everything around you, and it also significantly shortens your downtime on your overheat. So, your overheat is like a half a second overheat, and you burn everything around you. Cold as the grave makes it so that every kill you get refunds a percentage of the target's health as cooling to your gun, so you can keep firing your gun longer without it going into overheat. And hot bullets makes it so that any rounds that are fired when your heat meter is in the red burn the target. So you have 2 effective ways of dealing fire damage, but all of them essentially revolve around the overheat mechanic for the minigun. They just simply act as mini modifiers. Then when you actually look at the overclocks that they have these, you know, pretty big, significant penalties in some cases. So all the gear pieces, I have 1 or 2 ideas for possibly adding some reworks into it. And I want to explain why on each. probably the easiest thing I could explain. On the armor, I don't think you necessarily need another piece for the armor. I would maybe like to see a handful of perks get moved into armor. I would like to see Shield Link moved over as an armor. I would like to see Elemental Insulation moved over to armor, but I think that might be a tad bit overpowered because you could stack that on other classes that already have it. Maybe something like Veteran Depositor, Sweet Tooth, or Born Ready, Unstoppable, Strong Arm. Some of the lesser used passive perks could maybe get thrown over as an extra tier of armor mod, particularly Shield Link. Because Shield Link is one of those things that's nice to have. If you look at your active perks, what are your active perks? Hover Boots, which is kind of trash. The only character who's going to use that is going to be a Scout. And you shouldn't be using that. There are better modifications. See You in Hell, it's nice, but it's basically, you know, if you want to go for a super melee whale with See You in Hell and Iron Will for maybe a melee-focused driller, either that, it's just a gimmick for the detonation, the Predator nuke. Beastmaster's nice for solo players. It's a lot of management, but it's something I would keep as an active. Dash is something I would keep as an active. This is very highly run. I think this would be broken as a suit modification, if I'm being honest. Just, you know, oh yeah, let's say you up the cooldown on it and put it as a suit mod. That would be fucking ridiculous, but I could maybe see that happening. Heightened Senses is another great solo player perk, and Iron Will and Field Medic are great for multiplayer and Berserker. But 9 times out of 10, so you're going to have a combination of Field Medic, Heightened Senses, Iron Will, Beastmaster, Dash. That's what you're going to see. You're not seeing the other perks. Shield Link is one of those perks I see sometimes, because it's a nice to have, but it's kind of like, I have an extra perk slot, I don't know what to do. I think it gets more utility if you put it into the armor. So, I don't really see a lot for armor. That being said, covering some of the pickaxes, each survivor, or each dwarf in my opinion, sorry, I've been playing some Evil Dead, each dwarf should have their own specific power. So, an example to me would be for the gunner, one tree that you could have here in place of tier 3, we could have 2 modifications around the pickaxe power attack. One would make it so that if your pickaxe power attack gets a kill on anything larger than a grunt, you regenerate 10% of your ammo. This, to me, would offset one of the gunner's bigger issues, which is ammo consumption. You could have another modification for it as well, where it makes it so that if your pickaxe attack kills an enemy with a certain amount of HP, or like the same thing as before, so basically you kill a Praetorian with your pickaxe power attack, you could make it so that it reduces the cooldown of your pickaxe by 10 seconds. But this effect has a cooldown and can only happen once every 2 or 3 minutes. That could be unique to them. Then you could have another series of things. So for the gunner, you could maybe have a series of status afflictions where normal pickaxe swings have a 20% chance to deal fire damage. Normal pickaxe swings have a 20% chance to electrify an enemy. You could change the shockwave effect so that the power attack now no longer deals damage to enemies, but it creates an electrified radius around you for 2 or 3 seconds that electrocutes enemies to give that. A lot of the weapons we see have bonuses that are tied around certain status conditions, particularly fire, electricity, poison. So I think it'd be kind of nice if you have that effect for maybe the gunner being able to inflict more fire off your pickaxe. For the scout, probably the one I would say is that I would give the scout a modifier where when you perform your power attack on your pickaxe, you can now hold the triggers and it will lock you in place and stop your momentum. So you could kind of use it like a climbing axe to stop yourself as you're falling. So that could be a nice tool for scouts who, you know, tend to grapple too high and die. They could just press well, for PS4 it'd be L2 R2. So you could press and hold L2 R2, and it would let you just lock into place with your pickaxe straight into a solid surface. You know, another modifier I would like to maybe see is that your pickaxe, if you score a kill with your pickaxe on Praetorian or larger, you regenerate 1 grenade. That's something that's kind of out there that would be really strong, but I would give it to the Scout, because as of right now, the Scout's grenades are kind of the least impactful. Like the Driller, the Drillers are probably the most impactful, then I would say Gunner, then I would say Engineer, then this. Cryo's good, Stasis is good, the Pheromone is meh. The Pheromone got massively nerfed when the crossbow came out. But the Cryo's really good. You only carry 4. So that could be a way to just constantly run around, like, cryo grenading everything. But if you put a decent enough cooldown on it, I don't think that would be an issue. I didn't really think of an extra tier for them. I thought for the Scout pickaxe in particular. For the Driller, the first thing I thought of on the pickaxe has to do with throwing axes. So now you could run a modifier where while you have throwing axes equipped, you can use your power attack with the pickaxe by consuming 1 throwing axe instead, but it breaks, so you cannot retrieve it whatsoever. So a common concept people do with the throwing axes is they will throw down their spare throwing axes into the ground before a supply drop and come back and pick them up. With this mechanic on the pickaxe, it would make it so that if you do choose to run throwing axes, that your pickaxe, you could use your pickaxe more often. This would help the melee build a bit more, but at the cost of range. Another thing I could potentially see is activating your pickaxe's power attack gives you 10 or 20% damage resistance for the duration of the cooldown. So this could make it better so that people who run charge speed, you would have that run a little bit less often on the Driller, and it'd be more inclined to pick Serrated Edge. Another idea I came up with for the Driller would be your pickaxe deals 10 or 20% more damage to enemies that are afflicted by status conditions. So I would specifically exclude Cryo. I would not make Cryo any part of it. I would just make it maybe fire and poison. So that would, because you already take bonus damage from on Cryo with the kinetic. So I would definitely not want to buff the Cryo cannon any further off of that. For the Engineer is kind of an odd one, because they're kind of a jack of all trade. One thing I came up with that could give the Engineer a little bit more utility is maybe a healing mod, where you can use your pickaxe's power attack once per mission on a down survivor to instantly resurrect them, kind of like a field medic insta-res. But they, if you use this modifier, they cannot heal for a certain amount of time, or, you know, they can only use their pickaxe for a certain amount of time. Something along those lines, maybe, or another type of utility healing. If you hit an ally with a pickaxe power attack, it heals for, 20% of their health. Just to give a little bit of a medic vibe to the Engineer. Another thing I could potentially see for this is if you hit every hit that you get with your normal hit you get with your pickaxe could maybe let you stack a damage bonus to power up your next pickaxe attack. That could be something unique to this. A lot of these can be floated between the classes, but it was really something just to give each class its own unique, like, pickaxe ability. One thing I definitely came up with that I thought more in line for the Scout was that if you use your pickaxe power attack on terrain or minerals instead of an enemy, you would get 50% of the cooldown refunded to you. So that could make it a bit more for mining instead of combat. Although the scout's already pretty good for that. For each of the gear pieces, I think more for overclocks was my initial design. So starting with the gunner's shield generator is pretty common. They actually have a decent amount of versatility. Larger shield lasts longer, shield recharges faster, larger area. This one's not really picked. The shield's protective lingers. That's not that picked. Maybe I would prefer overclock as opposed to an extra set of modifiers, at least for some gear. So like the shield generator, one of these could maybe have gear modifications, and the other one could be overclocks. For the shield generator, something that could be very easily done is any damage that would be inflicted to the shield regenerates a percentage of your ammo, or ammo regeneration per second. This could keep the gunner from having to order so many supply drops on some of their heavier weapons. You could have another modifier where you regenerate a certain amount of health per second in the shield generator while you're in the shield generator, but you can no longer fire through the shield generator, and you can no longer leave the shield generator once you enter. So kind of like a dome effect that locks you in, but lets you heal up a little bit. This could give a little bit more utility as well to the gunner, rather than just big machine gun man go burr. The last idea that I thought of for the shield generator was that enemies could still pass through the shield generator. When they enter the shield generator, though, they get stunned for 2 seconds, and they take a small amount of tick damage per second. Although, in my opinion, this could be kind of broken, particularly now with the coil gun coming out. That idea kind of goes out the window. For the zipline launcher, there's not much I could say. Something I've definitely thought of is the ability to reset ziplines. I think a modification that lets you pick up ziplines would be nice, but you could no longer regenerate ziplines from supply drops. So you have, 4 or 5 ziplines going into a match. That's all you have to work with. You can't just set up a giant assembly line of ziplines all across the map, but you could pick them up and move them as you wanted to. Another one I thought of you would remove the fall damage reduction. Like, you could no longer stop your momentum on a zipline, but you could zipline at twice the normal speed, going up or down. Another modifier that I thought of that you could do would be you could shoot a zipline from another zipline, kind of like a zigzag. So if you're on a zipline, you could fire another zipline from that zipline, but it would have only, say, 30% or 33% of the angle and length of another zipline normally would. So you could maybe maneuver around caves a little bit easier. All in all, not much for the zipline. Either that or another one where you could now use a zipline launcher, kind of like a grappling hook, where you could shoot it into an enemy, and you would pull yourself to that enemy and do like a slam into them for like 200 damage or something. But, you lose the zipline, obviously. For the flare gun, the first thing I thought of on the flare gun was a damage mod where they illuminate less, but now they do higher burn damage on targets. So now it does like 100 damage on a shot, and you'd have to carry less of them, obviously. Another thing I thought of as a modification for this is if you could shoot a flare, a throwable flare, with a flare from your flare gun, and it would create kind of a flashbang effect that would blind nearby enemies so they wouldn't be able to see anything. They could still attack. They would still attack, but they wouldn't. It'd be kind of like a pheromone grenade almost, where they would just attack blindly as opposed to focusing on you. So they could maybe attack each other, or it could create an effect where it just creates an explosion of light, where it massively lightens up the room for like 2 to 3 seconds. Could be an interesting gimmick to incorporate the flare gun with the flares. Either that or, just for the memes, you could potentially throw strong arm into the flare gun where, now you throw your flare, you actually shoot your flares from your flare gun. So if you have the flare gun equipped and you press circle, it now fires your flare instead of just throwing it. So it wouldn't consume the flare gun ammo, it would consume a rechargeable flare. That could maybe be something I could see being done.
Rock and stone to the bone.
For the grappling hook, I don't really have a lot of things for the grappling hook. Grappling hook builds are pretty much exactly the same. The only difference you're really going to have is at like tier 1 between the reach and the recharge, and at tier 2 between the fall damage or the recharge. That's the only differences I see. I know a lot of people don't run this longer reach because there's the mandatory one at tier 2, so they'll run this one. And you get some people that they want the even shorter cooldown, so they run this instead of the fall damage, and I run the fall damage because I like falling. One thing I could see on the grapple gun is the ability to stick your grapple gun onto items, similar to Bosco, but the cooldown would be double, or the cooldown would be triple on your grapple hook. So, you know, if there's a Jadettes crystal or an alien egg that somebody has dropped, you could just shoot your grapple gun to it and it would pull it towards you instead of pulling you towards it. That's the main modification I thought of. A secondary modification is if you shoot your grappling gun onto an ally that doesn't have a shield, you can provide them with a temporary, a very short health shield, but it puts your grappling hook on cooldown. That was more of an overclock idea than a modifier. The grappling hook's kind of hard to work around without some tweak changes to it. Something I thought of is if you grapple a second time while in air, you can retain all of the momentum from your previous grapple into it, so you can kind of create like a super slingshot grapple where you can just keep gradually building up speed and speed and speed. For the driller, the satchel charges really have two builds. So you have the ammo build where you run the extra ammo, you run the kill switch because that's the only choice, you run the extra ammo, and then you run pretty much anything here. And that gives you the 4 satchel charges that don't do a lot of damage. Now I run the damage build, I run the 2 damage modifiers, so I only get 2 satchel charges, but they do a shit ton of damage. Satchel charges really don't have a lot of utility. The first thing that I thought of on the satchel charges that to me makes the most sense is you could place satchel charges on top of, say, Molly. And when Molly walks by enemies, it automatically detonates it. Kind of a meme build idea. There's not really a lot you can do with the satchel charge, because it does do a lot of damage. Like, even if you go for the ammo build, right? 375 damage is a lot of damage. Now, the satchel charge is designed to be used not for damage as much as actually mining. You stick it to something in the environment, it blows up. So, some ideas I thought of to do with mining is that, like, you could run a satchel charge build where your satchel charges are like lightweight satchel charges, where they now throw a lot farther, but they do less damage. Or they throw a lot farther, but they can no longer be disabled by kill switch. So, cause the satchel charges really don't throw that well. Reinforced power drills is much easier. There's the damage build where, you know, you run like barbed drills and bloody cold drills. I mostly run the extra fuel. A modifier I thought about for the drills is you could now drill into minerals, but it would consume twice as much ammo or twice as much fuel, or it would only get you half of the minerals. Now obviously you can mine around minerals instead of, you know, pickaxing it. To me, that's a bit more time consuming. I normally just pickaxe it and be done with it. But it could make gold a lot more collectible. Gold's not something that's usually picked up a lot in some of the higher level games. People don't really care about gold because you get more money from just speeding through missions. You get more experience from just speeding through missions on higher difficulties. And where gold takes 2 pickaxe swings instead of 1 compared to something like Nitra, it just doesn't have the same priority to it. So, for the drills, maybe if, you know, I could drill into them but I'd only get half the gold that I would normally get. I mean, if I'm spending, you know, half a liter of fuel for 20 gold, that's not a bad thing if I don't use the drills that much for mobility. Say we have a gunner or an engineer and I'm using their mobility tools more than my own. If I'm a combat driller, one thing I thought of is that any enemy that you kill with your drills drops 1 gold, similar to, like, the golden bugs effect. Another modifier for the power drills is if you power drill into terrain for a set duration, like, let's say 3 seconds, if your drill overheats, it creates a little shockwave in front of it that kind of clears some more room. That could be an interesting idea for maybe an overheat build on the drills. Last up for the engineer, the platform gun is really the hardest one to do. I mean, there's only 2 builds. You're going to pick the extra ammo here. I don't know why you would ever pick high capacity magazines here. I don't know why you would ever pick rate of fire here. There's no need for either of those modifications. You're going to pick the fall damage modifier. And then the only real choice here is the repetitive additive. So, you know, the enemies avoid your foam, which I see a decent amount, or extra ammo, which is what I got for more platforms. I generally tend to use the platform gun as a tool for either creating, like, you know, like pancake sandwiches, bridges, or staircases. So, something I thought of on the platform gun is it could instead have maybe a meter where it kind of lays it like concrete. So instead of shooting an individual platform, it has a canister to it, and it shoots it as a beam. So you could create a beam of the additive instead of necessarily shooting at the individual platforms, making it more like a concrete gun. Another modifier. One issue is there is a build for it for the shard diffractor. It's not in here. It's an overclock for the shard diffractor where if it shoots into the additive, it like blows it up. That took away one of my ideas on the platform gun. Like, if you stack 2 platforms on top of each other, you could shoot it with a certain amount of ammo, and it would cause an explosion. But the shard diffractor kind of took that away from me on that. For the platform, the gun platform, I really don't see how you could add an overclock or a modifier. This is the one that stumped me. The only thing I could maybe see would be reworking some of the base stats around, like maybe making Gemini system into an overclock, and then like adding, you know, hey, you want more ammo, you want more damage. Maybe you could have an entire tree of like Mark II upgrades, so you could have like each of the Mark II upgrades would only be like a little bit. So you could have Mark II, Mark II, Mark II, Mark II, and then have all the other modifiers be competing up against it in its own tiers right here. So you could potentially have, you know, like an upgrade. You could run 1 super turret. So imagine like having a full tree here of like 5 Mark 1s. If you pick all 5 Mark 1s, you get like, you know, 40 damage a shot, maximum range, but your ammo capacity is limited. It's really hard on the sentry guns, because for me, they're kind of fire and forget, and a lot of the builds you could do with the sentry guns are kind of either limited to the Warthog with the turret whip, or into the Stubby with their overclocks that are based around shooting the turrets and turning them into EMPs. I saved the grenade for last. I don't know if DRG is planning on adding a 4th primary, a 4th secondary, and a 4th grenade. That, to me, would make sense. You have 4 dwarves. I think if you have 4 dwarves, you should have 4 weapons for each dwarf. That's what I would cap it at. I would love to see, obviously, a medic dwarf as a 5th dwarf. More of a support-based dwarf that heals the team. I can see why they don't do that, because they want the players to be forced to work together. But I would really like to see an extra weapon or 2. So, just covering this real quick. I don't want to put this in the balance video that I plan on doing on the weapons. Looking at the gunner's primary options, to me, the thing that the gunner is missing most is kind of a single shot type option as a primary. Like a really high damage railgun. That's, obviously they introduced that into the coil gun as your secondary. Something that was a bit more rapid fire is something I would like to see as a secondary. Maybe have an automatic weapon Because right now you have a single shot, a burst, and a single shot. Having like a basic type of like a TMP type pistol, like a machine pistol, would be kind of nice. Kind of similar to the Sabata with the full auto. Just to give this slot. Looking at what's missing here, they don't have a really long-range weapon. Possibly a laser beam similar to the Shard Diffractor could be nice. Or maybe a burst fire weapon. Because all of their primaries are sustained fire heavy weapons. I would love to see a burst fire weapon in here. Where something similar to the Hurricane, but it's in a burst mode. So maybe like a burst grenade launcher where it fires out like a 3-round burst of grenades every time you pull the trigger. For a grenade, they have the sticky grenade, which is good for single target kills. Incendiary grenade, which is good for fire, but it's also the most lethal. And the cluster grenade, which is just really good overall damage. Something, in my opinion, that I think would be missing here would be maybe a non-damaging grenade, because every class has a grenade that's more of a utility, that provides some utility. All of the gunner's grenades are like straight damage. Maybe a shield grenade, where it's a throwable grenade that creates a mobile shield, where it only lasts for, say, maybe 2 to 4 seconds. It has a really small duration, but it creates a safe zone where enemies can't go in, and then it blows up after a short duration. Got like a bubble shield. For the Scout, the Scout's kind of got a decent amount of options. You got a mid-range option, you got a long-range option, you got a mid to close-range option. I would maybe like to see another close-range primary for the Scout. If you look, you have 2 types of ARs and a single shot. Maybe you have like a heavy shotgun, like an automatic fire shotgun, similar to the Warthog, that could be in this role for the Scout, where it's a close range automatic fire, but the spread is massive. Looking at the secondary, they've got the single shot boomstick, they've got the Zhukovs for a rate of fire, the Bolt Shark for the single target DPS, which is usually what the Scout is good at. I would maybe like to see something a bit unique here. A bit out of the box. Not like a conventional weapon. Kind of like what the Driller has, where all the Driller's weapons are like fucking out there. The only conventional weapon that the Driller has is the Flamethrower and the Sabata. So something out of the box would be really nice for a secondary there. Give the Scout some uniqueness. For a throwable, I want an actual straight damage grenade. Like an actual damage grenade that works for me for the Scout. You know, you call it like a spike trap or something, where you throw it onto the ground and it lays out spikes and they pop up intermittently over the course of 6 seconds and just deal like piercing damage. Or it's like an armor break grenade, like a nail bomb type effect. The Driller is all over the place. So we have a fire weapon, we have an ice weapon, and we have a poison sludge type weapon. So we need a shock weapon. That would cover the elemental effects for the Driller. Maybe you call it the Tesla Cannon, like Winston from Overwatch. Give him a Tesla Cannon. That would be a great idea. Kind of a close range. You can't aim it. It just shoots lightning out in a short cone in front of the gun. That'd be really cool. I think you'd have to balance it a little bit around some of the shock modifiers, but giving him the last elemental type would be effective to me. So you have the Sabata, which is kind of your basic bitch pistol. No offense. You got the EPC, which is your basic laser gun. You got the Colette Wave Cooker, which is designed to synergize with the other weapons. So how about this? How about we give him the Buckshot? A double barrel shotgun, handheld double barrel shotgun, fires slugs. So the way it works, you got 2 ways you could build it off your modifications. You can build it as a long-range slug. Just shoot straight out. 2 shots. No spread, no nothing. Just like a straight slug. Like a giant rock you're shooting at. Or you could build it as like a shotgun. But it would have a much faster rate of fire than, you know, the boomstick. Much faster reload. Kind of make it unique to him. Either that, or you could give him something out of the box, like a Tesla gun. For grenade, his utility is pretty good. He has the HE grenade for straight damage, which is unfortunately never picked. You have the neurotoxin grenade, which is really good for poisoning enemies and for flame damage. But the throwing axes are what most people run, because you get 8 of them. They deal a massive amount of damage. They're reusable, and they're just really fun to use. So, something out of the box here could work as well. So he has, if you don't want to do a Tesla gun type thing for this, some type of a shock grenade would be my advice. Or a non-lethal grenade. Giving him a non-lethal grenade, because technically all of his grenades are lethal. Maybe something along the lines of like a poison grenade, where if it would kill them, it causes them to like explode in a tiny mushroom cloud. That'd be kind of cute. Last up for the engineer, they have a decent balance. You have the Sabata for close range, Stubby for close to mid range, and the Smart Gun for not aiming. I would like to see another not aiming weapon, but mostly because it hits all enemies on the screen, like a type of shotgun similar to the Warthog, but it hits everything on the screen. Allies, enemies, loot bugs, anything that can take damage, it will hit. But it has really low ammo. That might work better as probably its 4th option for a heavy weapon instead, if you want to call it like the Incinerator gun or something, the Incinishot, where it's like a flaming shotgun that just hits everything on the screen. Regardless of range, it just hits it. But it only hits it for like 1 pellet for a little bit of damage, but it has guaranteed fire chance. For a primary, if you want to do something like that, for a primary, I would like to see something a little bit more out of the box. We have a shotgun, we have an SMG, we have an assault rifle, maybe a sniper rifle. Giving the engineer a sniper rifle, that could maybe cause problems, given the fact that sniper rifles are usually low ammo, and their heavy weapons are all pretty low ammo. For a grenade, I would like a better damage option. I don't like the proximity mines, personally, so I run the plasma burster. The lure is alright. Maybe another type of an engineer-based grenade called like an ammo pack, where it's a grenade that you throw out and it detonates after a set timer, and the amount of damage that it deals gets increased by the amount of times that you shoot it. This could go very well with something like the Sabata, or the Warthog, or the Stubby in particular, where, you know, you could just unload, you know, let's say 5 or 6 Stubby rounds into it before it explodes. Now you have a grenade that deals, you know, like 2 or 3 times the damage it normally would. But just some ideas for some potential extra mods for the dwarves, or some overclocks for the other weapons, and an extra weapon or 2 for every class.